5 seconds to find his chair. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Recycled Water Committee meeting of Monterey One Water here in the Monterey One boardroom. It's Thursday, May 16th, 2024. It's 3 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order, and I'll ask for a roll call.
Pacific Grove.
Here.
Veranda. Here. Castroville. Marina Coast.
Here.
Monterey.
Here.
Okay, and we'll go to item number 3. And any additions to the agenda by anybody?
None from staff.
Okay, seeing none from the board or the committee, we will go to item 4.
Move approval of the agenda.
Thank you. Chair Moore has made a motion to approve the agenda as constituted. Any seconds?
Second.
I have a second by Director Habino. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move right along to item 5, which is public comments on items. Anyone wishing to address the committee on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now. Do we have any public comment in the chamber? I don't see any. And so I'll ask if there's any online callers.
I don't see any raised hands from the public.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and close general public comment and go to item 6. Consider approval of Recycled Water Committee minutes of March 14th, 2014.
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
It carries unanimously. And any opposed? Didn't hear any opposition votes. And we'll go ahead and go to item 7, an update on Pure Water Monterey.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith and committee members. While Chai is getting up the expansion construction slides, I'll touch on current water making. So April was a good month at 314.
I don't think that's on.
Is he?
Okay, now.
There you go.
Is it good? April was a good month at 314 acre feet. Through April, for the accounting year, we're at 3,319 acre feet. Remember, each year M1W is required to recharge 3,500. So really by the end of May, M1W will have met its annual obligations. Everything after that is gravy, or as the Water Management District calls it, operational reserves. So get another solid year. Total since startup, 14,800 acre feet for this month. Okay, so on expansion, again, specific objectives. Next slide, please. At AWPF, there are some shutoffs happening, some system shutdowns to cut in pipe to get ready to connect the new equipment. We're excited that the UV equipment has shipped from Germany, and we think will be arriving by the end of May. So last time that was a long lead item that came in late. Looks like it's going to come in early. Of course, Allison is our day-to-day project manager on that project. Next slide, please. And you can see when the other big equipment shows up. Next slide, please. So this is where all the hay is being made in Jacksonville Phase 4. So we'll look at some slides. This is our area, again, to put you in context. This is Seaside Middle School along General Jim Moore Boulevard. This is Eucalyptus Road, which is the dead end. So any board member could drive up there right now and literally be within arm's reach of some of the photos you're going to see. But we're right around here. We're drilling our first new deep well, and then we have a monitoring well that we're also drilling. Next slide, please. So this is the new rig for the deep injection well number 5. Okay, it was taken on Monday. The marine layer was in, didn't help the photo much. And then our next slide, our last slide, especially like this slide, again, this is Eucalyptus Road. You're looking roughly southeast, but you can see the drill rig for the monitoring well. And then in the background, you can see that second drill rig. That's for deep injection well number 5. So we're really happy with our driller, Majora Brothers, for them to commit 2 drill rigs simultaneously to one project. It's kind of unusual in their business. So we're happy that they're making good and taking our schedule seriously. With that, I'll hand it back to the chair for any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Chair Moore.
So you mentioned some shutoffs necessary at Pure Water Monterey to cut
in the new equipment as part of expansion, what sort of impact might that have on actual water production from Pure Water Monterey?
Well, the
Phase one.
shutoffs are typically 4 or 8 hours in duration. I think there might be 1 or 2 24-hour. What the operations guy do is they fill up the reservoir before the shutdown happens, so that the feeding of the wells isn't impacted. They just drain down the reservoir during that shutoff period. The next shutoff that we've got coming up, which is scheduled for June 18th, tentatively, will actually be coordinated with some other shutdowns that Jose and Daryl's guys want to do anyway. So we're
For
gonna
routine
kind
maintenance.
of get,
Yeah.
2 birds with 1 stone during that shutdown.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other directors? Kent? Yeah.
You mentioned the reserves. Where are we at in terms of our reserves right now?
We have roughly 1,870 acre feet in reserves. So nothing has been set aside to reserves this year. It's only when you hit 3,500, whatever comes after that
Oh, that's
is
right.
put into
Okay.
reserves. The water management still buys the water from M1W. If they're not selling it, they just put it into their books as an asset, and it's waiting for them to sell at a future date.
And we do have a verbal from the Water Management District that based on the projection for this fiscal year, they would be able to pay for additional amounts going to reserve for June, hypothetically.
It's water in the bank.
And just quickly, how are we doing from when we started, minus the fact that we had to re-advertise I think it was the deep wells that we had to go back out and do a second time
Right.
around. So minus that, how are we doing in comparison to what our projections were as far as completion?
The original, what we call the baseline schedule for both contractors are still looking very good.
Okay.
Again, what we focus on are the long lead procurement items, which in both cases for both jobs, it's the major electrical equipment. So some of that will arrive January of 2025, and then some will arrive in March of 2025.
Okay.
Until that goes off track, we're looking very good.
Perfect.
So we're still looking at the end of 2025 for
Yeah.
water.
And that shows on the Gantt chart with the monthly staff report.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Moore.
So I want to one other follow-up question. So what do our agreements say happens if in the off chance we have a good year, we have a bunch of water to put in reserve, but for whatever reason, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District doesn't have the money to pay for it?
So the agreement, and it's the amended and restated water purchase agreement for both Pure Water Monterey and Pure Water Monterey expansion. It lines out the 200 acre feet going into reserves each year. For right now, up to a total of 1875 acre feet, and ultimately 2750 plus or minus acre feet. So within that, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District is sort of committed to pay for that 200 acre feet per year. If we go above that, we need to tell them and or ask them, does their budget have enough headspace to pay for any additional water we could put into the ground? Thus far, they haven't said no, but they could. So limited and required at 200. Anything above that, it is at their discretion.
So if we ever got into that position where we'd hit the required limit and they didn't have the funding to pay for it, then that would basically have to come back to the board for policy. What do we do? Do we keep pumping water into the ground and it belongs to us and maybe we sell it later, or do we literally ratchet back the plant?
Yes. Now, in that scenario where Monterey, the water management district says no, and if the board would like to move forward with it, then we need to look at it from a financial standpoint. Does the Pure Water Fund, because it's its own fund, have the money to keep pushing?
Right.
Or do you do an interfund borrowing or something to that effect? So
Okay. But
those
it's
are
not-
other implications.
And it's not covered by a particular, it's not specific, that circumstance isn't lined out in paper how we would handle it at some point. Board would have to make a decision.
Yeah. Jim, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think we should probably address this question maybe at a later time, because there are storage right issues implicated. If I'm not sure if we have the right to store water in the basin, if the water management district doesn't take the water, so
But this
it
won't
doesn't
actually,
pay for the water.
this
Well-
won't come to be until, I mean, we've got reserves that we have to meet after the expansion. We're not even close. Right now, we've met the first goal, but we haven't met the second for expansion, and that would only come into play after that has been reached. So we're a few years out before we even need to worry about this.
Yeah, we're probably close to 4 or 5 years out.
But you know, I like to look ahead.
Yes,
All right,
thank you,
very
Tom.
much. Thank you, staff. We appreciate it. We're gonna move on to the next item. Item 8, and I think we're gonna have a presentation by Mr. Holden.
Yeah, and I'd just like to do a brief introduction. So, yeah, Bob's been doing a tremendous amount of work on developing the interruptible and incremental rates. As you may know, and Bob will get into it, when we bring different source waters in, or for instance, when Salinas has asked us in the past to bring some of their stormwater in to help them out with their ponds, we need to charge them because it's our wastewater fund that ultimately incurs those costs. So this sort of nexus of what the costs are versus charges is what Bob has been working on, and actually additional staff as well. It is on the agenda as recommended to the board for action. However, due to the complexities of this, and you'll see it when we get into it a little bit, what we're proposing, this is an information item that we're looking for some feedback on. We're going to do a more robust outreach to Water Resources Agency as well as the city of Salinas in hopes of, or the goal would be to bring it back to the June Recycled Water Committee meeting and then the board meeting at the end for hopeful adoption. But that is all dependent on, we want to make sure our partners are heard and get their comments answered. So with that as a backdrop.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, this is on. Testing, testing.
I'm not hearing you too well.
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, now can you hear me?
Can you hear?
Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
It's working.
Yeah.
Testing, 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 testing. Testing, testing. And you can hear me.
Hey, Jim or Tammy, could you hear Bob there?
I can hear
cannot.
Bob. Yeah, I can hear Bob, but
It's light.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, Chair Smith and members of the committee, I'm Bob Holden, Principal Engineer. So I've brought this interruptible rate to this committee several times in the last 10 years. They've applied to the ag wash water or interruptible, or sorry, the industrial wastewater for 10 years, and for Blanco Drain, Reclamation Ditch, and Pond 3 for 4 years. So I'd like to, let's see. Oh, good. Yeah, could you go to the next slide, please? So as you know, we have 3 main water sources coming into the treatment plant. From the north, Moss Landing, Castroville; from the east, Salinas; and from the south, Peninsula and Marina Coast. Next slide, please. So what we're talking about is some additional waters. So the Salinas Industrial Wastewater System, which goes right by our Salinas pump station. We can collect water there. The reclamation ditch, which we pump water that goes to the Salinas pump station. And we can also get,
Raise it high. Oh, back up a little bit.
oh,
It's a directional mic.
oh, so,
No, you just have to be a certain distance.
all right. Okay. So, yes, and we've got stormwater can go yes, to pond 3, and pond 3 water can go to the treatment plant, and Blanco drain can go to the treatment plant. Next slide, please. So we also have backwash, so internal flows within the treatment plant. Particularly interested today in just talking about the backwash water from the Advanced Water Purification Facility, the Salinas Valley Reclamation Facility, and the Salinas River Diversion Facilities. Next slide, please. So I don't know how to point and talk at the same time. So here's our original treatment plant. Blanco drain picks up water just before it enters the Salinas River and pumps it directly to the treatment plant. We have reclamation ditch, pumps water short distance into a city of Salinas manhole, sewer manhole that goes to our Salinas pump station and gets pumped to the treatment plant. We have the ag wash water or industrial wastewater picked up directly at the Salinas pump station and pumped to the treatment plant. And then we have the Salinas industrial wastewater pond system, where we take water from pond 3 at the end. So we're taking the industrial waste effluent and we're pumping that to the treatment plant. Next slide, please. So we started looking at these new source waters for Pure Water Monterey in 2012. We started using a temporary shunt where we had to manually pick up this flap gate to allow water to go into our Salinas pump station to get the ag wash water in 2013. We had our first interruptible rate approved then in 2014. We had additional rates approved in 2015, 2017. 2017, City of Salinas completed the industrial or ag wash water or industrial wastewater diversion to our Salinas pump station. And 2020, we completed the Blanco drain pump station, reclamation ditch pump station, and the pond 3 pump stations. 2022, we approved another set of interruptible rates. And we also then started the incremental rates. I'll mention those a little bit later. And then in 2023, we just approved continuing the 2022 rates for another year. And then that brings us to today. So situation we had back in 2013, 14, our previous general manager, Keith Israel, knew that we needed some additional waters to come into the treatment plant for all of our recycled water needs for SVRP and for this future groundwater replenishment project. Those waters come in, but our users, M1W users, only pay for primary and secondary treatment. They don't pay and shouldn't pay for primary or secondary treatment of other waters that aren't sewage that they're providing. And so the general manager wanted some way of being able to charge less for these new waters just for the use of recycling. Came up with this idea. And so he tasked me to start with a special user rate. It's a rate that we establish each year through the customer service department, through the board approval of the rates of the budget. Special user rate, which takes the flow, the biochemical oxygen band or BOD, and suspended solids, or takes those and calculates a charge these are special users in that it's not a homeowner, a restaurant, or some of the things that are already classified. This would be for something that, something new. So if we had charged the special user rate, like for Pond 3 water now, it'd be over $2,200 an acre foot. And so he wanted something that would be quite a bit less. Because he reasoned, this would be during summer times mostly, when we had lots of capacity, excess capacity within the pump stations and treatment plant. We would need no extra labor. Nobody would be hired to do this. And a lot of other things wouldn't change. So then I was tasked to look at those things that would change due to the flow, the BOD and suspended solids. So we created this thing we called interruptible rate that does not contain sewage, has another legal method for disposal, can be turned off when we don't need the water for SVRP or AWPF, and it does not require additional infrastructure. So we assigned all those, the costs went through the budget and assigned costs that we thought would be affected by, again, the flow, BOD, or suspended solids. Initially, the concern was that we were charging too little. And so we hired a outside expert in the Prop 218 and 26 laws, who reviewed our system, reviewed what we were doing, and said that Prop 218 and 26 did not apply because these are voluntary fees, they're not imposed, and they're reasonable compared to other fees. In 2022, we developed the incremental rate. This is at the request of Monterey County Water Resource Agency. We were talking about charging for these backwash flows within the treatment plant, and they, as well as us, didn't want really to pay the full special user rate. So let's see. So for those, oh yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? So these are the user rates then for the incremental rates for backwash water. So they're low because all the things like pumping cost, replacement, renewal, operation and maintenance, insurance, just almost everything is paid for by separate accounts. This is only then the cost to reimburse for the primary and secondary treatment. So using the data we collected in 2023, we determined that the basic variable costs for all 7 of the waters we're looking at averaged 7.01% of the special user rate. And so we're intending to use 7.0% rate for both interruptible and incremental rates from now on. So next slide, please. So using those rates for the 4 interruptible rate waters shows here the interruptible rate. So that, well, the variable cost at the top, the dollars per acre foot, and then the fixed cost, the dollars per year below for the 4 water types. And then we can compare that, next slide, please, with using the same water quality that we just measured. These would be the variable cost in dollars per acre foot if we paid the full special user rate. So quite a bit higher. So this would be the amount if, yes, if there were no interruptible or incremental rates. This is also the rate that we would charge for water that we don't want, don't need for, again, for recycling, for SVRP and AWPF. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Chair Moore.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And I know this is a little hard to understand. It's a complex issue, particularly anything bound up potentially with Prop 218, which so far I think our attorneys seem to say doesn't apply, but I want to delve into that in a moment. So who has paid any of these rates to date?
So initially, it was the city of Salinas paid the rate, all the rates for years. There have been, well, once AWPF was online, I don't know, Department 58, I don't know.
So the Pure Water Fund has paid it also. So City of Salinas Pure Water and the Pure Water Fund has been allocated some of these.
So I can understand a rate being charged to the city of Salinas with respect to their industrial wastewater treatment basins. But are you saying that the city of Salinas also pays for water we take from the Blanco drain in the reclamation ditch?
So
No,
those weren't available back then.
I'm sorry, say again?
For 6 years, there was only ag wash water, only the direct diversion at our Salinas pump station. And the city of Salinas paid for every drop of water that we took.
But in reference to Blanco Drain and Rec, those rights are for pure water at this point. So the Pure Water Enterprise Fund is paying the treatment rates for it, that.
Okay. And that's understandable because treating those waters to go into Pure Water Monterey should be a part of what we recover as charges for Pure Water Monterey water sold to various customers. The one I'm struggling a little bit with. So until we came along and started taking water from Pond 3, what was happening to that ag wash water treatment wise?
Treatment wise, it's the City of Salinas' treatment ponds, and it's just time and aeration. There's really no treatment process like you're used to seeing at our plant. It beyond moving through the treatment plant and having some the ponds and having some aeration, it percolates and evaporates.
Haven't they, over the decades, accumulated some biosolids in the bottom of those ponds? And what do they do with that stuff?
It's not wastewater.
They drain the ponds and
Dig it
they
out?
dredge it out. Or
And
they
then-
scarify the bottom to make sure they can continue.
And then dump the mud in the river, or
Where did they take it? Because they did that just like last year, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know where.
I don't know where they took it.
went.
It's their. They would not just dump in the river.
So this is a
For the record.
wastewater.
for the record?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
didn't want my brethren in Salinas to yell at me.
Why didn't you say anything?
Yeah.
Anything further, Tommy?
Yeah, so the revenue that we collect under these rates gets allocated to what funds?
It would go to the wastewater fund because it is to pay for the primary and secondary treatment. That's what the rates that Bob's. So to give a little more backstory, when Bob first started doing this, I was sitting in his office with him, and I had experienced interruptible rate on the PG&E side. They have interruptible rate for ag. I bet you guys have it as well. And that basic concept, this isn't a new concept. It's just applying to where we're at. And we needed to find a way to pay the wastewater fund so as our wastewater customers did not subsidize another user.
Okay, and then final question, which probably has to go to legal. since this is a rate setting process, why is Prop 218 not being followed?
That's directed to Jim.
I think this is a contractual rate pursuant to an agreement, Tom.
Okay, only with the city of Salinas.
Correct.
And the Water Resources Agency. But that's that agreement that we've been working on for a while.
Right.
That industrial wash water to go to CSIP, it needs to be a contractual arrangement there.
Okay, so help me out with Blanco Drain and Wreck Ditch. If we've set rates for those, who pays those rates?
The Pure Water Monterey Enterprise Fund. So it is attributed to the overall O&M costs for pure water, which is then, we calculate down to a per acre foot cost that goes to the water management district, and well, just the water management district, because Marina Coast, although a customer of Pure Water Monterey, does not have Blanco or REC allocated to it.
Okay. Let me think on that a bit.
Okay, why don't you think on that, and why don't I'm going to take it out to the public. Just I don't see anyone in the audience, so let's just check online, make sure there's no one, and then we'll come back with more discussion. Anyone there?
Don't see any hands raised.
Okay. And my other fellow directors, Tyler?
So we're saying that they were being charged too much, or the rate was too high. And I'm just trying to get clarification on that part of the conversation.
So I don't know that we were saying anyone was being charged too much. What we wanted to look at is, so for your house contributing to our facility, we have to take it whenever you put it down the drain. I mean, you are buying into the entire system, and there's reliable service 24/7, 365. On these interruptible rates, it was, okay, Blanco drain, for instance, as Tom alluded to, we can shut it off whenever we want. So if there's an issue at the treatment plant, that is a benefit to the overall treatment process where we can shut these flows off whenever we would like. In addition, so when Bob goes over these rates, I don't even know how many spreadsheets and how many lines of data you have that he's worked on over the last decade, because your contribution, well, you have the pipeline, you have our pump stations, you're using everything. These are using a subset of everything. So we were more discerning in how we looked at it.
And maybe I misunderstood during the presentation, but it sounded like we were charging a rate, and then maybe I misheard this. It sounds like we recognized that it was too high.
No,
Did I
I'm sorry.
misunderstand that?
I didn't explain it well. So when we first brought out the rates, there was some concern that we weren't, actually that they were too low. And that's when we went to special counsel that just focused on 218 and
That was the consultant that
26.
we hired. for
was, well, yeah, a lawyer, high priced lawyer who just just looked at those kind of issues. And he gave us a written report, which we could, probably find and share with all, explaining why we don't fall under 218 and 26.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Tyler?
Sure. I think maybe to describe, maybe to ask this in a form of a question. The numbers that we're coming up with are, does staff feel that they're reasonably recovering the costs associated with the services that we're providing?
Yes, with the services defined as any of those being interruptible, we can stop them whenever we want. So there's a different in how we attribute costs to that type of water.
Yep.
What Bob was alluding to when he said the special user rate, that water based on the, well, I guess not flows, but the BODNS and suspended solids would be way higher. And I think that's the sort of the difference we're trying to show is looking at a subset of the overall cost of the agencies for this benefit of being interruptible.
And there's still the fixed rate associated with what they're
That-
being charged as well.
That's a
so-
separate issue. Yes.
Okay, all right, I think I understand now. Thank you.
Ken?
So going forward, this is informational. All three parties need to come to the table and discuss these rates in terms of outreach questions. Or is this something that we're trying to derive here?
So that's a great question, Ken. So being that we are developing the rates and it's based on data that, as Bob said to you, we can point to, we could push this through. We just felt, based on the complexity, as Tom mentioned, and the fact that, you know, these are our partners who are paying these rates that need to build it into their budget. Let's do more outreach to both to make sure we totally understand their concerns and thoughts and they understand our process. That's the only reason we're sort of delaying this thing. If we wanted to be a bull in a china shop, we could. I just don't think that's the way to go about this.
And then going back to the 2015 agreement, wasn't there going to be some things that were going to happen sometime this year in terms of technical thing? I remember Buki mentioning in a letter or something like there was going to be, in terms of coming to addressing issues within the agreement that they wanted to, you know, clarify. Wasn't 2024 the year that was going to happen?
You're talking about that letter he sent in like June of 22, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was this year or not. I'll go back and look at it. It's actually sitting on my desk as we speak. But I will tell you, Ara, as Arian, their current GM, and I have been talking about compartmentalizing the changes in the agreement and trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So for instance, there's some areas within the financial arrangement that could be clarified that we thought, let's try to take care of that. And then there's others in terms that we have different interpretations on part of the pure water side on the source waters. We'll take care of that and move on down the line. I don't recall the 2024 year, but I'll check on that.
And then the city of Salinas, is there been any outreach to them with the new city manager? Or?
So I have not reached out to Renee since he got the position. I think we mentioned this to the board that we have retained a retired annuitant, Steve Kerrigan from the city of Salinas, our former city manager. He did meet with Renee earlier this week just to tell him about his role here, as well as to share things about the new position. We have been actually dealing with Jim Pia, the assistant city manager, and to a certain degree, to a lesser degree probably, David Jacobs, their public works director. Got to admit, it's a little bit in a holding pattern with as much as they have going on and with Renee coming on. So those monthly meetings that we used to have certainly slowed down.
One more. Bob, the replacement fund,
Yes.
what does that consist of, the replacement fund as a cost center?
Yeah, so it's right. Money that would go into a reserve. Presumably actually maybe 4 reserves that were for each of the different pump stations, since they're all, well, one's not a pump station, a reserve for the industrial wastewater facility. I guess it's underground facility that takes the industrial wastewater and brings it into our Salinas pump station. But idea this would be a fund that would be available in 10, 20, 30 years for replacement or repair, whatever major repairs of these facilities.
So is it is there a time limitation, or is this something that if you need to replace something major, you could tap into that fund or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a renewal replacement fund that you know things are going to happen over the next 30 years and you're trying to plan for it. But when things happen, you, at least hopefully you have enough money to pay for it. A perfect example actually is going to that Pure Water Enterprise Fund when our electrical issues happened. It's like, that's a big dollar number. So we're tapping into that renewal and replacement fund, even though we didn't anticipate the electrical failing. We were planning for new membranes in 7 years and other things, but you can't always identify what's going to happen next.
Okay. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, so several comments. I realize that the phrase interruptible rate is a term of art and that you all are very familiar with it as a term of art. But if you look at it from the perspective of the uninitiated customer, when you use that term, they immediately think, okay, rate is a noun, interruptible is an adjective. So this is a rate that sometimes goes away. Huh? How does a rate disappear?
Well, it disappears
I-
when we turn it off.
I know the revenues turn off. The rate remains the same, but my point is, please, when you present this, give us a good, solid, clear description of the meaning of interruptible rate for somebody who has absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Secondly, I do see we're kind of combining apples and oranges into one big basket here because the deal with Salinas and Salinas waters are based on agreements. And I do agree with Paul's, both his assertion and his sentiment, the assertion that we could just go ahead and set these rates like a bull in a china shop, and that's probably not a wise idea. If we were to try and do that, I have a funny feeling that Jim Gilpin might say, oh, well, guess what? Now you gotta, since you're doing this without an agreement, now you've got to follow Prop 218. And that would open up another big can of worms. So I hope we can get the Salinas issues appropriately negotiated with those parties and the County Water Resources Agency. But I see the Blanco drain and wreck ditch as a different sort of beast. And aren't we, even though we're setting these as a rates, aren't we in effect, if Blanco drain and wreck ditch are totally dedicated to Pure Water Monterey, we know that's a limited customer, which is Cal-Am and Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. It just seems that this is more having to do with the rate we charge for that and ensuring that all of the costs appropriate to production of water for the Seaside Basin via Pure Water Monterey are accounted for to include all the costs of sucking stuff out of the Blanco drain and the wreck ditch. And I presume in some of that rate making, you've also been thinking about putting reserves away to replace that pump station in 25 or 30 years for both of those locations and so forth. But is this really a rate making process as opposed to a cost accounting process to account for the cost of primary and secondary treatment of water from Blanco and the wreck ditch, which are destined for Pure Water Monterey?
So I guess we look at it as a rate making because we want it to be consistent amongst all water bodies or waters that we bring in and have a transparent process in the development of those rates, whether it's Salinas that's paying for them, us, Water Resources, or whomever else. You're absolutely right. It does just come down to an accounting issue internally when the Pure Water Monterey Fund is paying the wastewater fund. That absolutely is just a transfer right there. But from a transparency perspective going, we're going to treat ourselves or Pure Water Monterey, our enterprise funds, the same way we treat Salinas or Water Resources. So that was the perspective that we took in developing these.
And of course, the tricky part of any of those, whether it's cost accounting or rate making processes, are not the costs directly related to that service. I mean, you can figure out how much electricity the Rick Ditch pump station consumes and the Blanco drain requires based on its BOD of chemicals in the primary and secondary treatment process. What gets tricky is how much of your salary, Paul, do we allocate to that tranche of cost and to the tranche of cost for CSIP and the tranche of cost for basic treatment that goes to the ocean and the Pure Water Monterey and so forth. I hope we get a clear articulation of how indirect costs are being divvied up, because there's probably more than one. There's probably choices as to how you do that.
Yeah, we do the indirect costs through adding overhead to essentially everything, which
any cost that can't be directly attributed to that particular portion of our activity.
Yeah, and there's different indirect cost methods for the different contracts. But I know when we first started working on this, Bob, we were like, okay, if these lights are on, it doesn't really matter for an interruptible rate. So I thought we didn't like attribute this sort of thing. So we went that granular.
Right. We went to
get to an interruptible rate.
Every budget item within all the treatment plant departments and looked, is this something that is going to change with flow, BOD, or suspended solids? So like elevator maintenance is not. It's most of the PMs, the preventative maintenance is on a time basis rather than flow basis. So we weren't going to hire any more people, and we aren't going to build any more facilities. So I don't know, we went through every single bit budget item.
Seems like that's to go through every single budget item and say, yes, that's in there. No, that's not in there. Yes, that's in there. Yes, no, that's not in there. Seems far more complicated than, for instance, saying, okay, average year, 5% of our input waters come from Blanco drains, 7% from the Wreck Ditch, 84% from our various wastewater flows, and dividing up all of those fixed costs based on those percentages.
That would have been much easier, but I still get twitching because of the time I spent in Bob's office looking at every single one of those items.
Well, you wouldn't have to.
Well, no, we felt we did at the time.
Yeah.
Just to have that nexus, a nexus, not quite report, but nexus spreadsheet to the actual costs as we were trying to prove. You're absolutely right. If we look at the Water Resources Agency contract, there's an indirect cost model that's in there that we use, which is entirely different than the granular one that Bob went into to try to be more focused on what is truly attributable to an indirect cost. And I think you see that in many areas, like some places don't even go as detailed as you stated. They'll go indirect costs are 12%. Okay, what's that based on? Well, on these averages over the last 10 years. So there are a variety of methods that we can use, and we've passed these by, like Bob said, attorneys. I think it was Michael Colantano that did that one. I think about it. And also other consultants such as NBS and other financial consultants that have looked at things.
I guess since we started out years and years ago just as treating wastewater for our customers, and then we bring these other new things, we go from being a environmental protection and disposal agency to a water production, environmental protection, disposal, and water production agency. I just want to make sure that our basic original customers aren't inadvertently through indirect costs or any other method subsidizing some of the new things, because the water we produce is not sold back equally to all of our customers. It's
Correct.
in one case sold to one specific subset. And then Pure Water Monterey to Cal-Am and Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, a different subset of all our customers.
Thank you. That was actually very interesting and complicated. And I would actually, I have to agree with the chair on when you bring this to the board, make it as clear and simple as possible because it's a lot of information. So I don't know how we can do it any differently, but I appreciate you guys working on it so hard and grinding it out, as it were. All the tense moments reading over the data, I'm sure. So in any event, this is information only. We don't have any action on this item. So we're going to go ahead and close it out and move on to item 9, which is staff reports.
And I have none. Look around here.
The only thing I have, Paul, is I wanted to share with the board, last committee meeting, I said we were just firing up SRDF, which we have in the last 2 days. We're averaging about 16 MGD pulling from the river. So things are going well there. That's all I have to report.
Great. Thanks, Tammy. And if I'm not mistaken, Tammy, can you, I thought I saw an email that once SRDF was up, we didn't use the supplemental wells at all a couple days.
Correct. But we had to for some pressure.
Yeah.
And, but yes, the well usage is down very low.
Right, which is great. Good.
Any other reports, Paul? Anybody? Okay, so we'll go ahead and go to item 10, committee member reports. Any reports up here? Anybody?
Just a comment. Thank you very much for a good report, particularly on a complicated issue. So, and listen to our feedback and questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Holden. It seems like a pretty complicated topic as we already discussed. So thank you all for coming out today, and I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.